The colourful bandana covering 6-year-old Lily Thompson's head was decorated with tiny unicorns and rainbows, chosen specifically because she told her mother that unicorns were brave and magical, just like she was trying to be. Standing at the Family Feud podium, she barely reached Steve Harvey's waist. Even with the small platform the crew had built to help her reach the buzzer, her thin frame seemed almost fragile under the bright studio lights. But there was something unmistakably fierce about the way she held herself, like a little warrior who'd already fought battles most adults couldn't imagine. The Thompson family had driven 8 hours from Portland to Los Angeles, making frequent stops so Lily could rest and take her medications on schedule. Sarah Thompson, Lily's mother, carried a discreet medical bag containing anti-nausea pills, pain medication, and the careful documentation that had become their daily routine since Lily's diagnosis 6 months ago. Tom Thompson, her father, kept checking his watch, monitoring the timing between Lily's treatments, making sure this magical day wouldn't interfere with the rigid medical schedule that had become their new normal. Lily's older brother, Connor, 10, stayed close to his little sister, with the protective instincts that had developed since their world had been turned upside down. He'd become an expert at reading Lily's energy levels, knowing when she was having a good day versus when the chemotherapy was making her feel sick and tired. Today was what the family called a unicorn day, one of Lily's better days, when her eyes sparkled and her laugh came easily. The Make-A-Wish Foundation had arranged everything. For months, while Lily underwent treatment at Oregon Health and Science University, her one request had been wonderfully simple and heartbreakingly specific. She didn't want to meet princesses or go to theme parks. She wanted to be on Family Feud because she'd told the social worker, "Steve Harvey makes everyone laugh, and I want to make my family laugh too." Steve had been briefed about Lily's condition. Of course, the producers had explained the situation with their usual professional sensitivity, mentioning that she was undergoing treatment, that she tired easily, and that her appearance might be affected by chemotherapy. But no amount of briefing could have prepared Steve for the moment Lily walked onto a stage. Her rainbow bandana bright under the lights, her smile so genuine and fearless that it immediately transformed the energy of the entire studio. During the family introductions, Steve approached the Thompson family with his characteristic warmth, but something shifted in his demeanor when he knelt down to Lily's level. Maybe it was the way she looked directly into his eyes, without any of the shyness most 6-year-olds displayed on television. Maybe it was how her tiny hand gripped the podium with determination that seemed too mature for her age. Or maybe it was the simple fact that Steve Harvey, father and grandfather himself, recognized courage when he saw it. "Well, hello there, beautiful," Steve said, his voice automatically gentling. "Look at that bandana. Are those unicorns?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "They're brave unicorns, just like me." Something in the simplicity of that statement, the matter-of-fact way the 6-year-old declared herself brave, hit Steve harder than he'd expected. "Brave unicorns, huh?" Steve smiled. "I bet they are. And what's your name?" "Lily? I'm 6 3/4 years old." She held up fingers to demonstrate, a gesture so purely childlike that it reminded everyone watching that despite her circumstances, she was still very much a little girl. 6 3/4. Steve repeated. "That's a very important age. What do you want to be when you grow up, Miss Lily?" The question was routine, the kind of innocent prompt Steve asked young contestants. All the time, usually kids answered with typical childhood dreams. Astronaut, teacher, princess, superhero. But Lily paused, her expression becoming thoughtful in a way that seemed to age her small face. The studio waited. Steve waited. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath as this tiny girl in her unicorn bandana considered a question that carried different weight for her than it did for most children. When Lily finally spoke, her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the studio with perfect certainty. "I just want to grow up." The words hung in the air like a prayer. 5 simple words that contained more wisdom and longing than most adults, expressed in a lifetime. The studio audience didn't react immediately, because they weren't sure they'd heard correctly. But Steve had heard every word clearly, and something about the profound simplicity of Lily's answer stopped him cold. Steve's smile faltered for just a moment as the full weight of what she'd said settled over him. Because most 6-year-olds took growing up for granted, assumed it was a given, a natural progression they didn't need to wish for. But Lily, who was fighting battles that no child should face, understood that growing up wasn't automatic. It was a goal, a hope, something to work toward rather than something to expect. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. The game had been progressing normally up to that point. The Thompson family was playing against the Martinez family from Arizona, and both groups were clearly enjoying themselves. Lily had successfully buzzed in twice, giving answers that landed on the board and making her family cheer with pride. Each time she scored points, she'd do a little happy dance that made the entire studio audience laugh with pure joy. But now, during the fourth round, everything was different. The question had been designed as a fun prompt for family-friendly television. We asked 100 people, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" It was Lily's turn at the podium. She stepped forward carefully, her mother's watchful eyes tracking her every movement, ready to intervene if the excitement became too much for her small body to handle. Steve read the question with his usual enthusiasm. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Lily looked up at him with those wise, bright eyes and gave the answer that would change everything. "I just want to grow up." Steve set his cards down immediately. Not dropped them in shock, but placed them deliberately on his podium as he walked toward this remarkable little girl who had just taught a studio full of adults something profound about hope and determination. "Lily," Steve said softly, kneeling down in front of her so they were eye to eye. "Say that again for me, sweetheart." Lily's voice was steady, unafraid. "I just want to grow up. That's all I want to be." The studio fell completely silent. 300 people collectively held their breath as they processed the simple profundity of what this 6-year-old had just shared. But Steve wasn't thinking about the audience or the cameras anymore. He was thinking about his own grandchildren, about the way children should be able to take their futures for granted, and about this extraordinary little girl who couldn't. "You know what, Lily?" Steve said, his voice thick with emotion. He wasn't trying to hide. "That's the best answer I've ever heard in all my years of hosting this show." He reached into his jacket pocket, but instead of his usual business card, he pulled out his phone and did something unprecedented. He made a call, right there on stage, in front of everyone. "Dr. Martinez?" Steve said into the phone, his voice carrying clearly through his microphone. "It's Steve Harvey. I'm here with someone very special who reminds me why we do what we do. I need you to clear your schedule, because I'm sending you a little warrior who deserves the very best care we can give her." Steve ended the call and looked back at Lily, whose eyes had grown wide with curiosity rather than fear. "Lily," Steve said, "I have a friend who's the best doctor in the country for brave unicorns like you. And he's going to make sure you get everything you need to keep growing up." But Steve wasn't finished. He began removing his suit jacket, the gesture that had become his signature in moments when the show transcended entertainment and became something sacred. "This jacket," Steve said, wrapping it around Lily's tiny shoulders, where it hung like a magical cloak, "has been with me through thousands of shows. But today it's going to be with the bravest person who's ever stood on this stage." Lily looked down at the jacket, which was so large on her small frame that only her hands peeked out from the sleeves. She pulled it tight around herself like armor. "Am I really brave?" she asked Steve, her voice small but hopeful. Steve's eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. "Lily, you're not just brave, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You know why? Because being brave isn't about not being scared. Being brave is about being scared and showing up anyway. And every single day you wake up and you fight and you smile and you make your family laugh. That's not just brave, sweetheart. That's superhero level brave." Steve stood up and turned to address the entire studio. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying a gravity that transcended entertainment, "we just learned something important from Miss Lily Thompson. We learned that the simplest dreams are sometimes the most powerful ones. We learned that growing up isn't something to take for granted, it's something to celebrate every single day." He looked directly into the camera that would broadcast this moment to millions of viewers. "Lily just reminded us that every birthday is a victory, every milestone is a triumph, and every day we get to spend with the people we love is a gift we shouldn't waste." The audience erupted in applause, But it wasn't typical game show cheering. It was the kind of applause that comes from witnessing something authentic, something that cuts through all the noise of daily life and reminds you what actually matters. Steve knelt back down to Lily's level, his voice becoming gentle again. "Lily, I want to make you a promise. Every year, on your birthday, for as long as you want me to, I'm going to call you and we're going to celebrate together. Because watching you grow up is going to be one of the best parts of my job." Lily's face lit up with pure joy. "Really? Every year?" "Every year," Steve confirmed. "Because that's what we do for superheroes. We make sure they know how special they are." What happened next became one of the most beautiful moments in Family Feud history. Lily, wearing Steve's oversized jacket like a cape, began to laugh. Not polite television laughter, but the genuine, infectious giggle of a 6-year-old who had just been told she was a superhero. And her laughter spread throughout the studio like wildfire. The audience laughed, the competing families laughed, even the crew members who had seen thousands of tapings found themselves laughing with pure joy. Steve stood up and made one more announcement. "We're changing the rules today," he declared. "Both families win. Because when someone teaches us something this important about hope and courage and the power of simple dreams, everyone wins." The confetti fell, the music played, but the real celebration was quieter, more meaningful. It was in the way Lily's parents looked at their daughter, seeing her not as a patient or a case study, but as the remarkable little human being Steve had recognized. It was in the way her brother Connor beamed with pride at his sister's courage. It was in the way everyone in that studio understood they had witnessed something rare and precious. 3 years later, Steve Harvey received a phone call that made him drop everything he was doing. "Steve, this is Sarah Thompson, Lily's mum. I wanted to call and tell you that Lily just had her last chemotherapy treatment. The doctors say she's in complete remission." Steve's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, that's incredible news. How is she?" "She's amazing," Sarah replied, her voice full of joy. "She's 9 now, and she starts 4th grade next month. Her hair grew back curly, and she says it makes her look like a princess. She still wears your jacket to every doctor's appointment." 3 months after that call, Steve received a package in the mail. Inside was a drawing that Lily had made, showing herself and Steve standing together on the Family Feud stage. In the picture, they were both wearing capes and crowns. And at the bottom, in careful 9-year-old handwriting, she had written, "Thank you for helping me make up. Love, Lily the brave unicorn." But the most meaningful item in the package was a small note in Lily's handwriting. "Steve, I grew up just like I wanted to. Now I want to be a doctor so I can help other kids grow up too." The episode, when it aired, became a phenomenon. Not because of the game or the competition, but because viewers recognized something powerful in Lily's simple wish. Parents called their children into the room to watch. Teachers played it in classrooms to talk about courage and hope. Medical professionals shared it to remember why their work mattered. Steve began incorporating Lily's message into his motivational speaking, often saying, "A 6-year-old taught me that the most important thing we can want is simply the chance to keep becoming who we're meant to be." The jacket that Steve gave Lily became a symbol of hope in pediatric oncology wards across the country. Other children began asking for brave jackets during their treatments, and eventually Steve's foundation partnered with children's hospitals to provide special jackets for young patients, each one labeled with a simple message, "For the brave unicorns who just want to grow up." On Lily's 10th birthday, Steve kept his promise. He called her to sing Happy Birthday, and when he finished, Lily had something to tell him. "Steve," she said, her voice now that of a confident 10-year-old. "I did it. I grew up, just like I wanted to. And now I know what I want to be, when I grow up even more." "What's that, sweetheart?" Steve asked. "I want to be like you. I want to help people remember that growing up is a privilege, and that every day is a chance to be brave." Steve Harvey had made people laugh for decades, had hosted thousands of shows and met countless contestants. But he would always say that 6-year-old Lily Thompson taught him the most important lesson of his career, that sometimes the biggest dreams come in the smallest packages, and that the most profound wisdom can come from someone who simply wants the chance to keep becoming who they're meant to be. Because that's what happens when a little girl in a unicorn bandana reminds an entire television studio that growing up isn't automatic. It's a gift, a goal, and most importantly, a reason to keep fighting for tomorrow. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Because sometimes the most powerful answer to what you want to be when you grow up is simply, I want to grow up.